This is a brief introduction to some elements of psychology in driving and how not to kill people. Changing any form of behaviour can be difficult, and driving is often an entrenched behaviour. For some people, it's a very big part of who they are. The behaviour can be difficult to change. Towards the end, we'll look at how hazard spotting, amongst other things, can help you feel better about your driving. It's a short video, so let's get on with it. These are the sort of things that happen in these accidents. A 10-year-old boy hit by a car. He survived. Sadly, these 3 8-year-old girls did not survive. And the mother was killed and the child survived in that crash. It's quite horrific. So who is next? Change your mind, save a life. Or maybe change your mindset and save a life would be a better way of putting it. Imagine for a moment you come across an accident on the road and in the wreckage you find a child injured and bleeding. Do you turn and walk away, or do you do everything you can to help that child? That sounds more like you, doesn't it? You want to help. Well, children were injured in accidents today. You couldn't help them. You didn't see the accidents. You were nowhere near them. If you don't know anything about it, you can't help. Well, not today, but you can make a big difference next time you drive. You can help other children. With a few basic psychological principles, you can help a child and adults not have accidents tomorrow. The downside is, if there is such a thing in this instance, you'll never know who they were, and they will never know who you are. They'll never know that you helped them with just a few basic principles. So, what can you do that helps them? We all know how to drive. You've probably passed a driving test. So why don't we drive effectively? This is about psychological elements, and we'll leave driving courses and car safety to other professionals. So what will you do? How will you change your driving? How will you change other people's driving behaviour? Have you thought about that? The latter, changing people's behaviour, can be easier than you think. Sometimes changing other people's behaviour comes down to changing the environment. If you're driving at 50 miles an hour, there is a chance that the driver behind you may do the same. In many cases, we do that instinctively. If you drive at 30 miles an hour, the driver behind you may have no choice but to follow you, which may be annoying driving at 30 miles an hour, but we all have to stick to the speed limit at some point. But that change in driving is changing their environment, and it's having an impact on how they drive. So there's an element of changing people's behaviour already, just by making that subtle change in your own driving. If someone drives more slowly behind you, they will become more accustomed to driving slower than they might have otherwise done. So you've begun to change them. Changing our own behaviour can be difficult. When we're told something is dangerous, we often change our behaviour for a short period of time, but after a while we go back to old patterns of driving. There seems to be little gain by changing our behaviour, so we slide back. So that's where changing driving behaviour gets difficult. There's no immediate reward for changing your driving, avoiding an accident. If you've avoided an accident, nothing's happened. So what's the big difference? Well, we'll come back to that. First, a little bit of clinical psychology. This may surprise some of you, but if you have a look at this, you see that having a handheld phone slows your reactions by more than drink driving, more than being high on cannabis. So 13% for drink driving, 21% slowing of reactions for being high on cannabis, 27% for a hands-free phone. That's probably the biggest surprise. I have to admit, even I was a bit surprised when I read that one. 37% slower for texting and 46% for the handheld phone. So that comes down to normal reaction time at 30 miles an hour, 2 seconds, plus 13% for drink, 2.26 seconds, and so on. At 30 miles an hour, if you brake, 103 feet in 2 seconds. At 30 miles an hour, 2 seconds is 103 feet. 2.26 seconds is 116 feet, an increase of 13 feet at the drink driving limit. So on an ordinary town road, you could take 13 feet longer to stop. That could be the difference between stopping short of a child or another car and driving right into them. The difference with a handheld phone is over 23 feet. You probably won't have even slowed down by the time you hit the child or the other car. So you have to remind yourself how dangerous the vehicle is. For example, a typical family saloon weighs about 2,000 kilograms. A rhinoceros weighs about 1,700 kilograms. So you're driving a big beast. Imagine you're on a typical housing estate. Would you let a 3-year-old child wander over and pat the rhino? Probably not. Don't let the child wander over and pat your car when you're doing 20 miles an hour either. Now, I know someone who drives faster at night because, and I quote, "I can't see the hazards." Yeah, remarkable, right? He can't see the hazards, so he allows himself to go faster. Well, people do some odd things on the road. And the thing is, we should all be aware of our visual limitations, not just short-sightedness, not just nighttime, though I've come across people who drive without badly needed spectacles as well. But our general vision. When we drive, we often focus purely on the road ahead. Sometimes we look in the rearview mirror. We may as well throw away the wing mirrors, let's be honest, they just get in the way. But the fact is, we don't look to the side of the road very often. How many times have you thought to yourself, where did that come from? When something appears to hurtle out in front of you. I live on the edge of the countryside, so I'm used to people saying that pheasants or rabbits came out of nowhere and were right in front of them. You know what? Those creatures were at the side of the road before they came from nowhere. Paying attention to your surroundings, you can build up a bigger picture of what you might need to brake or avoid. And in fact, if you think about it for a second, if you stare straight ahead, your vision becomes a little bit fuzzy at the sides very quickly. Our actual clear field of vision is quite small. So if we stare ahead for a little while, it does get fuzzier and you can miss things. So when we're driving and we're concentrating on the road ahead or the car ahead, we take in less from the sides. So it's a good idea to constantly look to the sides and build up that big picture. You'd be surprised what you can see. And after all, the side of the road is where the kids are going to come from most of the time. Sometimes they'll be on board a car like this one. Grandchild on board. How many times have we seen that sign and never backed off? Well, earlier we touched on reaction times. If you drive with a bigger gap between your car and the one in front, you won't be able to read the grandchild on board sign, but then you won't need to either. I said earlier that there's no reward for driving safely. You don't get to see what went right in effect. Well, there is something you can do. When you look into the sides of the road, see how many hazards you can spot. See if there are children. See if there are footballs about to roll out that the kids might come after. Is someone about to pull out with this grandchild on board without looking? You drive into the side of them. It's a bit like having another go at your driving test with this. Remind yourself what you can see and what the hazards are. And I tell you what, if you look at those and then count each one as a win every time you go out for a drive and see how many you can count up, you can see how much good you can do. Although this is a theoretical exercise at the moment, it could be real one day. And that's the important bit. So, in short, if you look to the sides of the road, you build up a bigger picture. From a clinical psychology point of view, if you give yourself a bigger gap, then your reaction times, well, hopefully you're sober anyway, but hopefully you can give yourself as much reaction time as possible. Now, at the start of this short presentation, I used a series of images of children, and that's with good reason. We're more likely to look after the safety of other people than we are for ourselves. Think about the chances you take. We all take chances in one way or another in life, but we're less happy to enforce those on other people. We're even less happy again to enforce them on children. So use pictures of kids when you're doing your safety evaluations, whether it's in the workplace or for yourself. We're hardwired to look after kids, so for most of us, that will make a big difference. Now, there will be more videos in this series on driving and on general safety in the workplace. In the meantime, there is a free book on Amazon Kindle, Psychology and Safety, by yours truly. There is also a paperback edition that costs about £12, I think. There are costs involved with the printing, so we couldn't make that free. But the Psychology and Safety book is there, so help yourselves to that. That's it for now. We'll be back with more videos in this series. Thank you.